Fatalo Fatu, Nisan Bolivinaka, Kiorana, and welcome to Tutala Mai, our people, your stories. I'm Agnes Tupou. Samoa's Supreme Court has ruled in favour of challenges laid following the head of state's call for a second general election. This ruling means the second election will not proceed on Friday. Last month's election has revealed that Samoan voters are navigating difficult political waters, with many wanting lasting change in Parliament. To discuss the ramifications of the Supreme Court ruling and to dissect the politics at play, in studio, political commentator Christina Laalaai-Tausa, University of Auckland's Associate Professor Dr. Tamasailau Suaalii, and also former MP Arthur Anae. Malole soifua and welcome to Tutala Mai. Samoan elections. Let's get into it. What's happening in Samoa's elections now, if I could come to you, MP Arthur Anae?
I think the decision yesterday is final now at this point of time, and I think the right decision has been made.
Do you agree also?
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think it was not an easy decision to preside over. The facts of the case and the legal aspects of it were really pretty straightforward, I think. But the context in which you are going to make the outcome public is tricky. So I think, on both counts, there's lots of jubilation for the rule of law and for democratic principles. But on the other side of things that many Samoans are very aware of, there is some sensitivity over the way in which we deal with particular offices that require our collective respect for the mamalu or the dignity of those offices.
What can you expect over the next day or so?
It'll be interesting over the next few days. I mean, legally, as you mentioned, and as the guests have mentioned, there's now, the rule of law prevails as of yesterday's court rulings. However, politically, that is a different story because as of yesterday, the Prime Minister has announced that the Parliament will not meet until all the petitions have been finalised. So that they're still in a bit of a limbo there. So legally, the rule of law has prevailed, but politically, there's still instability there. So within the next few days, and we've seen in the past few weeks, anything and everything can happen in Samoa's case. So it won't be surprising if there are any more changes within the next few days.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but the difficult thing, first of all, going back to Samoa is governed by respect, Palualo. So the head of state, Tuli Malili made his decision based on information that was given to him. What we now know, he alone needs his own legal advisors to escape what happened this time. So Samoa is governed by that, but at the same time, the decision of the course has been made. And therefore that gives us a clear standing where we go from here. And the point raised about the stability of moving forward. We can't sit around and caretaker state Samoa as a nation with a caretaker government for 12 or 15 months while they go through the battle in the courts of all these things. I can't see that happening, and it can't happen. So a decision has to be made very quickly this week to install the government on the decision that was made yesterday, and then they can have their court battles later and sort it out over time. But on the international scene, Samoa must be seen to have a government, and there's no other choice from where I sit.
Obviously, with the announcement that was made, was any of this expected or were you surprised by it?
No, I wasn't surprised, but I was intrigued with what the steps will be going forward, right? Because I think that's the biggest test, is the way in which Samoa will move forward in terms of establishing a parliament and then dealing with issues that I really believe are at the crux of this election and the crux of the future of Samoa. And the fact that I think Samoa's in a really unique position to be able to make a difference worldwide, and that is the coming together of its custom law and its state law. You know, and this is something that many Indigenous peoples dream about, having the opportunity to do. And we have it, and it's entrenched in our constitution, and we have the ability to be able to make it real. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens here on.
Christina, do you believe that that's literally the same thing?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, if we just go back to the Constitution, to where, you know, when our forefathers drafted the Constitution and established Constitution, it was very clear, and they had a tōwhama mau, like the long view. They weren't short-sighted in creating the Constitution in order to safeguard Samoa from political instability and uncertainty. So if we just go back to that and just follow and adhere to that, we would be able to move forward, safely.
Can I get your understanding into what do these rulings mean moving forward? Arthur, would you want to start?
Well, my concern for a while now has been that we have deviated from what the forefathers of Samoa has said from day one. Pui pui Samoa mo taiao, protect Samoa for tomorrow. And we've seen these changes. And let's face it, nearly 100 years ago, our forefathers fought against the New Zealanders wanting to change our lands and titles the way they wanted to do it. And we fought against that. And so we had a Samoa that came through based on that basis. But in modern times, some of this has changed. And that's a concern. And I think the other thing that we've got to take into account worldwide, as people become more educated, they know their rights and they know what they want. And you can't dictate to them anymore. And we see this in the Middle East in a big way. And we're seeing it now coming through in the Pacific. And so whoever leads the country has to take this into consideration. And if, from where I would sit, I want Samoa to be protected forever, especially its land. If you understand the fact that migrating out of Samoa overseas is not so easy anymore. So it means they're all going to live in that same little square meter of land. And if you don't protect it, other people are going to start owning it. And that's what I'm seeing happening now. The day will come when the Samoan people will live on their land as tenants on their own land. And I sincerely hope that now with this change, people may start to focus back to what we should have and how we protect it, but at the same time move forward internationally like any other nation in the world.
Yeah, I think we have a real opportunity to walk the talk, to be able to put our money where our mouth is in terms of really digging deep. It's time to dig deep, to do that whakutanga search for the tōwha manino, so that we understand what it is that differentiates, say, for example, the Torrens system, which was introduced with the LTRA Act, that then led on to the 3 controversial bills, right? Which, if you trace the motivation or the impetus of that, it's to have access to customary lands, right? And in order to really protect what we mean by our customary lands, to do it in a way that is, in honour of the vision and the dreams of our forebears, we have to dig into what we understand by things like inganga tō, matu palapala, these kinds of concepts which are kind of thrown out there, but we don't have a jurisprudence around it. Our lawyers are trained overseas, but they're not trained in customary law, right? How do we gain our understanding of our nganu, tūmanganu that's entrenched in the Constitution? Well, the best way to do it is go through your families, to go through your village context, to do the donkey work that is required in order to get the jurisprudential knowledge to be able to back what you're saying, right? And I think it's time for the Lands and Titles Court to be made more transparent, to do it in a way that honours the tapu of our knowledges, the mana of our knowledges, and our rights as suli to those knowledges, but not hide behind it's a too hard thing to deal with, because then the politics and the abuse of politics come into play. And I think we've got a really amazing moment now to be able to make a difference in that area.
Christina, do you have any different thoughts on that?
No, just adding on to what these guys have mentioned is that what the difference between what the election this year brought was choice and change. And choice and change came through the Fast Party in terms of them going out to the villages through their road shows and having the discussions with the people, sharing information with them, and having meaningful dialectical exchanges with them. And I think that is the difference from how the FAST Party delivered in terms of the acts and how the HRPP Party delivered it. They did not provide that certainty in terms of the information that was delivered. And so the change came in the fast way, and therefore the people had a choice in the information that was given to them. And we all know that in a democracy, an informed citizenry makes for a good democracy. And we see that with the results now.
And that is the key. It's like international politics. They walk the talk to educate the people where the problem is and what we're going to fix. That hadn't been done in the past. It was more dictatorial in the past. Power, retained power. But for the first time, people have been given the information that they can make a decision on. And I think what has come through with that is that the bulk of the population want to protect Samoa above everything.
Is this a divided country though now? What is it that needs to happen though to, I suppose, mend those divisions? I'm going to come to you, Doctor.
I defer to the political scientists first.
Christina, go ahead.
I think what's important now is like we have seen sort of like a tension between democratic values and cultural values. But as Tamasailau has mentioned before, there is huge possibility of them coming together in harmonization, and there's huge opportunity there. And if we are able to align our democratic values with our cultural values, because at the moment Samoa's stability is premised on the fact that the whamatai and the Samoa protect the democracy at the moment. So if democracy can do the same for Samoa and whamatai and align those values through an architectonic process, we will be able to move forward together. Because at the moment, there's already an alignment between cultural values and spiritual values. Now it's the alignment of that and democratic values.
Arthur?
I would say whāwalo will prevail at the end. That's Samoa, full stop.
Yeah.
I think, there's some really interesting spaces here for exploring how we think about Suaalii and how we think about Suaalii being more than just being air, right? Because the other problem you have here is our overemphasis, in my view, on the English languaging, right? In the way in which we analyse and do Samoa in the current political context, in the current legal context even, right? So a lot of the decolonisation, if you like, is around how we understand the place of Samoan, our ngangana Samoa, in our thinking processes for what is the best way forward. And so just as an example, and it's still very much the driving force behind how we make decisions, our courts in Samoa, the language of the courts is English, right? And that's like stated as the official language of the courts. And that's in 2021. I think it's time we really sit down and rethink how we can integrate our Samoan frames of reference into all aspects of Samoan society.
Yeah, and you've both touched on it. How then does democracy in Samoa fit in regards to cultural and spiritual structures, or does it often clash? Christina?
So I think cultural and spiritual values have always been there, and they have come into a very harmonious marriage, if I can say that. Whereas democracy is a new form of government that has only been 60 years in the country, but it's a matter of looking at democracy, learning from how whamatai and Samoa and spirituality have been able to merge together and gel together, and then learning from that and see how democracy can do the same for both. If we look back into the laws and the policies from before, there's a tendency for democracy and for the government to manipulate the Samoan cultural protocols and values for democratic interests, and not giving back to the Samoa or the whamatai. So, like I said before, there needs to be some kind of harmonization between both, and because at the moment, democracy are just manipulating the values of and protocols of Samoa, and Samoa is not gaining anything from democracy.
What do you think about that, Arthur?
Well, if I look at it, there's three aspects of this. You've got Samoa traditional, Christian principles, and then you've got democracy. And it's how those three will be gel together to deliver for Samoa without losing any values. We can turn around and say that Samoa and the villages and the leaders of the Matais will always lead. But we also know the Matais will bow to the Christian principles and values first. Always. And then we have this thing called democracy, which is an international word and used, and how we fit within that to satisfy the needs of all people, because that's the key.
Any thoughts from you, Dr. on that?
I think, one of the most useful starting points is perhaps thinking about what our younger generation want, sort of moving into the future. Now, the Samoa, in the way in which perhaps our generation have tended to practice family relationships and respect, e whaaaloalo I tangata matutua, and that's right. But moving forward, it's a very different world in 2021. And thinking about what the world will look like in 2050, you've got issues of increasing globalization, increasing climate pressures, and that's going to shape the way in which our younger generation, who are going to become the leaders in future, will lead Samoa and what the primary issues would be. And I think what's coming out of many of the movements from the young people today is a constant refrain about the importance of a sense of belonging, understanding their whasinomanga, right? And so in order for us to do justice not only to the vision and the dreams of our forebears, but also to the vision and dreams of our young people moving forward, there needs to be a conversation between the different generations. We have to be real, right, around some of the good sides and not so good sides of Samoa, the good sides and not so good sides of democracy, Western democracy principles, and how they come together.
This question there is, why has HRPP endured so much criticism over so many years just to retain its political power? Let's come to you, Christina.
I think political socialization has told us that the dominant party is HRPP, and that has been the only party that Samoan people have been familiar with for the last 40 or so years, and 20 of those years under Tulepa's rule. So in terms of that, that's the only party they've been familiar with and affiliate to, because there has been an absence of an effective opposition. And so now, as we mentioned before, there's a lot of media platforms where people can share information about what a democracy looks like, what transparency and accountability means. People are now safe to have those conversations and to call out the government, if they are not transparent and are not accountable. And so the criticisms are coming in because people are informed. People have different platforms and safe platforms to voice their opinions. And we see that now. Yeah.
Social media platforms, they've played a big part in this election, haven't they?
Absolutely. But one cannot take away from Tulepa and his government what he's done for Samoa in 40 years, and the growth and development of Samoa has been phenomenal. And there's no such thing as a free lunch, as we know, so he had to do that. And we've ended up with that type of situation. So I just sit here and ask this question: what happens when the future Samoans start pulling away from religion and belief? What happens if the Matai system is so overcrowded it has no real values? What happens when what is happening around the world today, depopulation starts to happen? And that's real. And it will happen amongst our Pacific people. When you get a country like Singapore paying women to have babies and things like this, those are crucial things for us to think futuristic about, not necessarily just today. Today we focus on where we're going now. And we've just had an election that's given us a change that we haven't had for a long time. But the failure of politics is always this: when you become arrogant, and when you become dictatorial, and when you treat people as uneducated, they will fight back. And for the first time in 40 years, the population of Samoa have been educated by the way FAST did their things, with all the modern things that they have now to be able to talk and discuss amongst themselves. And the young generation who are coming back, educated, with new ideas that are now driving the world, they're not going to sit back and accept the old.
Yeah. I think there's, a lot of potential for collaboration as well. You know, I think it's a moment to think about Samoa in a way that is not just within its physical borders, but you know, there's such a huge community of Samoans who will always be committed to Samoa and the well-being of Samoa. And so there is potential here for the significant amount of expertise that is around the world, you know, that we could bring to bear on making Samoa the best that it can be, that she can be.
Yeah. As we wrap up, I'd like to pose the question to all of you. What lessons can be taken from this year's election cycle for Samoa? Let's begin with you, Christina.
I think a few lessons. So number one, as of yesterday's court rulings, within a democracy, that the rule of law prevails. Number two, that a democracy is a government by the people, of the people, by the people, for the people, and therefore we see their voices being heard and being projected at the moment. And I guess number three is that there's Samoa still, wrapped by whāloalo, alofa. So if we just stick to those values, those are lessons that we can again take ahead, take forward with us, so that our Samoa is safeguarded by those values.
Thank you. Arthur?
Well, Maori say, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. People, people, people. And the most important thing in Samoa is our people. And you can't dictate to them. That's Samoa. It'd never work. And you can't become arrogant in what you do things. And that has shown very clearly this time around. And so for me, the future of politics for Samoa is start realizing you are here and elected by the people for the people. And you deliver for the people, first and foremost. Everything else is secondary. And even in this country, we want to fly high. But at the end of the day, you've got to come back. What are the needs of the people? Deliver the needs of the people, otherwise they'll vote you out. End of story.
And a critical part of the people is whaasinomanga in the Samoan context, meaning their heritage, their identity, their sense of belonging. And what's wrapped up in that is being able to bring their tūmanga no entrenched in their constitution to bear in real ways, meaningful ways, honourable ways, alongside the democratic system that we've adopted for our nation state.
Nice. Well, I just want to say whakataitele rawa for joining us here on Tutala Mai. And that is our edition of Tutala Mai. I'm Agnes Tupou. And that's it for this edition of Tutala Mai. Thank you for watching, and thank you to the Tutala Mai team. You can let us know what you think on our PMN News Facebook page. This is Tutala Mai, our people, your stories.